Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Glick. If this is your first time joining us, our show is dedicated to a couple different themes. Number one is having on individuals associated with the industry, hearing about their origin story, and hearing about some of the projects that they've had going on. Um, Last week would be normally one of those episodes, but we actually did an industry news episode, mainly because heads down in the business and working, and didn't necessarily get somebody scheduled to do an interview in time. But we have some good interviews coming up over the in the coming weeks. But today we are on our regularly scheduled industry news episode, where we pull up three different headlines. We talk about the articles, how they're impacting the industry, and joining me, as always, on these episodes is Charles Covey. Charles, how's it going?
Hey, hey.
All right. So, if you're new to this particular theme of show with the headlines, it's easy to follow along if you're on YouTube and you can see because we'll pull the headlines up on the screen. We'll walk through them, read from them a little bit. But even if you're just listening in, which I know is most of you, you'll still be able to, we'll still read the headlines and read some of the content, and it'll work just fine going through and listening and not actually watching. So, with that said, we will go ahead and pull up the first article here, which is going to come to us from BizNow. Add this to the screen. All right. So the first article headline reads, How Project 2025's Proposal Might Impact CRE. So reading from the article, Project 2025 has been the buzz phrase trending across the political sphere and business world for the last few weeks, and the hotly debated 900-page blueprint for conservative governance took on new significance Monday in light of President Joe Biden's weekend decision to abandon the 2024 presidential race, a move that instantly forced the already chaotic U.S. election into a new level of disarray. For commercial real estate industry players who only care about their real estate business need to focus on just a few dozen pages in the Project 2025 tome. One slim section includes everything that has to do with U.S. affordable housing policy and how that could boomerang throughout the entire multifamily sector. So, continuing on in the article, the 900-page document takes a firm stance in support of maintaining single-family zoning in municipalities across the country, urging any future conservative administration to push back against the expansion of multifamily zoning. And together with this suggestion, with suggestions for placing new limits on certain types of housing vouchers and eliminating federal transit subsidies, the document is at odds with many efforts underway to improve housing access, including in Republican-led states. Something that I did want to mention as we were going into this, I mean, obviously, we're going to link to the 2020 or Project 2025 website, and so I think it's very important as you're reading through articles like this one as well to go to the source and see what it says. And Project 2025 also is it's from a think tank, from the Heritage Foundation, conservative think tank that is, and they've been putting together a plan for presidential candidates, should they get into office for their terms. They've been doing that going all the way back to 1981. So this has been going on for a while, even though it's getting a lot of attention now. I mean, they did the same thing back in 2016, going into Trump's first term. And I think one thing I did want to mention, because it talks in here about the stance in support of maintaining single family zoning in municipalities across country. I wanted to read really quick from the Project 2025 website and just kind of read a paragraph from it where they talk about, I guess, where their stance on single family housing is coming from and why they have that particular stance. And then we'll come back to this article, and then I want to hear what your thoughts are, Charles, on some of the things that have been mentioned here. So let me flip over really quick to this one. All right. So reading from a section here, this is on page 511. So obviously a massive document with a lot of information in it on their stances and particular areas and policies. So I'm going to read from this article here. So in the same manner, Congress, see here. Yep. In the same manner, Congress should prioritize any and all legislative support for the single family home. Homeownership forms the backbone of the American dream. The purchase of a home is the largest investment most Americans will make in their lifetimes, and homeownership remains the most accessible way to build generational wealth for millions of Americans. For these reasons, American homeowners and citizens know best what is in the interest of their neighborhoods and communities. Localities, rather than the federal government, must have the final say in zoning laws and regulations, and a conservative administration should oppose any efforts to weaken single family zoning. Excuse me. Along the same lines, Congress can propose tax credits for the renovation or repair of housing stock in rural areas so that more Americans are able to access the American dream of home ownership. So, flipping back over to the original article we were looking at, Charles, I'm not sure what thoughts you have on, this stance and kind of what this may mean in general for the housing industry.
Yeah, I think we have to paint this in context, right? So let's look at the context kind of behind this. And I was only recently made aware of the document, and as we start digging into it a little bit, I'm kind of seeing it tossed around a lot, and it's being tossed around a lot as, oh, this is Trump's agenda. And I don't think we have any information to indicate to us that that is true. In fact, they have denied specifically that it is the Trump campaign's agenda. Now, you can definitely say that there are people that know Trump and there are people that know the new vice presidential candidate that are connected to the Heritage Foundation. And so, yes, in the conservative world, there's a lot of people that are connected to the Heritage Foundation, either give money or they know what's going on. But the Heritage Foundation doesn't control anything that happens in a campaign or in an administration. Now, there's a lot of dollars there. It's a couple $100 million a year foundation from what we can see. It's about 10 families, family offices and foundations that are doing the majority of the financing. So there's agendas there. And I think we have to just kind of guise everything under this context of, yes, some people with agendas that gave a bunch of money to a foundation may have had some influence on this, and it doesn't appear Trump is directly connected in any way. So that's just good context for us to understand. Now, generally speaking, does the conservative political machine generally align with most of the things that are in this document? I think yes, for the most part. So we could say that a decent portion of this generally aligns with what we think a conservative agenda would want to accomplish. So that context, again, very critical. And the single family home ownership thing, yes, it is the American dream. We can make lots of arguments that it isn't the best way for an individual to make money. If you look at the way that people have sold homes, you buy a home at this, and in 20 years you sell it for double. Well, if you look at the IRR, that's not actually very good. If you would have done any other investment, you would have made more money. Stock market notwithstanding, anything else you could have done in real estate, commercial properties or apartments or whatever, probably makes you more money than the money you put into your home. So that whole thing of the single most significant way to establish wealth, I think that's arguable. It's the way that people do it because it's simple and it's just in front of them. They don't have to think about it. And it's just kind of a cultural norm to go buy a house and put money in it and keep stacking money in it over time. And hopefully you come out better than you went in. So you can come out better than you went in most cases because, the way things inflate and the growth markets that we work in. What is interesting to me is what it's talking about with single family zoning. And I think this is probably going to get used out of context. So again, back to the whole context thing. It's saying single family zoning should be prioritized and we should focus on that and we should build more single family homes. And I don't think any of us would disagree. That is absolutely what is needed. We have a lot of barriers to entry with municipalities and other counties and other entities that put up roadblocks, and those need to be knocked down so we can build more single family homes. But it doesn't appear that there's anything in here about not allowing multifamily zoning. There's some stuff here about maybe pushing back against multifamily zoning. I'm not sure the intent there, because in most cases, the apartment tenant is not a competitor with the home purchaser. Like they're not the same person. It's not an either or. Oh, I wanted to buy a house, but there's not one. I'm forced into an apartment. And in most cases, in most markets in the US, that's not the case. You can go buy a home if you wish to do so, or you can go rent an apartment if you wish to do so. It's a free market. And we have the ability to do all those things. And usually we're going to pick the thing that we believe is best for us. And that's the beauty of the free market. So just very interesting. I think there's a lot of need for single family zoning to be focused on to allow more homes to be built. But at the same time, it's not competing against other types of zoning in most cases.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be important to. I mean, we'll see as we follow this along. I mean, obviously with Biden now out of the race, I mean, we're going to be looking for whether it's Kamala who's going to be running in his place, which seems like it's going to be the case right now. But there's a lot of people who think that that's going to change potentially before there's actually an election. So I mean, there's going to be we'll have to follow along and see if they're if it is Kamala, is her stance on housing and everything going to be in sync with how Biden's stance on it and everything, or how is that going to change? Because ultimately, I mean, housing and land use and everything is one part to a very big decision that people have to make in the fall and everything. And I think it's just important and interesting for us to continue to kind of follow along and see what the candidates are saying with respect to the development industry and housing and everything like that. And I will link to, as I said, I'll link to the Project 2025 and specifically to the part that I read from the pages that are associated with the land side of things. So I will get that added to the show notes for this. So you'll be able to click through and read that. And I encourage you, those of you who are listening in, to read for yourself kind of what they're saying and understand what their stance is. And again, knowing that it is disconnected from any candidates, but there probably are going to be some overlaps between the Republican side and what the Heritage Foundation stands for and would like to see. So with
Yeah.
that said, let's go ahead and move on to the second article here. All right, so pulling up the second one. The second one comes to us from Reuters, and the headline on this one reads, "Key U.S. mortgage rate drops to lowest since March," Freddie Mac says. So reading from this article, the average interest rate on the popular U.S. 30-year fixed-rate mortgage fell to its lowest level since mid-March this week, a welcome development for a housing market struggling to find its footing, and one that may continue if the Federal Reserve cuts rates as expected in the months ahead. The 30-year fixed-rate mortgage averaged 6.77% during the week ending July 18th, the lowest level since mid-March, down from 6.89% in the prior week. Mortgage finance agency Freddie Mac said on Thursday. It averaged 6.78% during the same period a year ago. Data shows that home buyers are not responding to lowering rates yet, with purchase application demand remaining roughly 5% below where it was in the spring, Freddie Mac's chief economist said. So I thought this one was, interesting, seeing as rates are going, and I know we have the Fed still saying that, we're likely going to see a rate cut at some point here, maybe in the September timeframe, and also not in this article here, but I saw in another article that there's at least one head of a large financial institution who is calling on the Fed to slow their roll a little bit and maybe not do a rate cut in the fall. But what are your thoughts on what we're seeing here with the decrease in demand for housing applications or mortgage applications as the rates have gone down slightly?
I don't think it's shocking from an economist standpoint. You've got people looking ahead and with almost 100% certainty that the rates are going to be lower at some point in the near future than they are today. And I think that's an accurate prediction. Almost certainly they will be lower at some point in the near future when the Fed drops the rates as they've said they would do. Now, how much lower to be determined, right? But for sure, it's going to drop a little bit. Now, I did some quick math because I was curious. So on a $400,000 home, let's say this is essentially a starter home, $400,000 house, 25-year note, 1% interest difference is about $250 a month. Okay. So Not the end of the world, not giant money, but it's meaningful money to a lot of people in a starter home scenario. So if they're waiting for a percent drop. It's about 250 bucks a month difference to them. So that's interesting. I think in most people's head, it probably feels like it's a bigger difference than that. Um, but you've got a bigger swing though. If you're going from an apartment to a new home, that's the 250. But if you're going from a home that you live in now and you're wanting to upgrade, it's a whole different ball game because now you're going from maybe a 3% rate into a 6% rate. So it could be $700 or $800 a month difference to do that jump. So, now coming down, it's like it's still a pretty big gap. So I think we're still going to see a lot of homeowners staying put and not moving up every 2 or 3 or 4 years like they normally would have. And we've been this I hate to sound like a broken record, but we've been talking about it kind of in this same way for the last couple of months here. It seems predictable to us. It seems like that's going to stay the same. We're not going to see a lot of people moving. Doesn't make sense, as we talked about last time. It doesn't make sense to buy an existing home even if it was available, because it just is more economical to buy the new home. And so we're going to probably see a bit of a lull. And so if you're watching builder stocks, or if you are a builder, probably looking at a lull over the next number of months, maybe into the end of the year, what was a slower time generally. So it could be very slow for builders over the next 6 to 8 months. And then as rates kind of hit that 1.5% below where they are now we see all this pent up demand all come to the table at one time. Seems realistic that that could happen. So that's what, in my head, that if I was predicting, that's what I would say is likely, is that we're going to see a combination of rate decline coupled with some seasonality, give us probably in early to mid 25 start to see a pretty big push for more new home demand. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I want to. What I'm really interested at seeing is how does the consumer react if there is a rate reduction in the fall. Does it do anything to consumers at all, or will they see that, listen to the words that the Fed says, like, hey, we're planning on doing another one in in the spring meeting, or
Right.
whatever that looks like, to where they, well, we, like you said, it's not normally a hot buying market and in the late months of the year anyway. So maybe someone's going to just wait over the winter until they get to the spring and wait for that next rate cut before we start seeing anything meaningful as far as an increase in those mortgage applications and everything. So that, I think that's going to be really interesting to watch and see. Or if there's no rate cut at all, what does that do to the consumer mindset at that point? Like, does that maybe trigger something and say, well, maybe it's never going to come down. Maybe it's now or never if we want to go and do something, or if they're just going to accept that, hey, we're going to stay in this apartment for the time being, and maybe it will be a couple of years.
Yeah, I think at some point we start to see this pent up demand start to be meaningful, because it's going to pent up demand in a couple of ways. People that are in a house, their family's growing, they need to get into something larger, they need to upgrade, they've been waiting. At some point they're going to be like, you know what, forget it, I got to move, we don't have any more room. I know
Yep.
plenty of people in that position. I don't think we're there yet. I think we've still got a little bit of runway there. You've also got people that are in a rental situation that are going to start getting tired of paying rent. They're like, you know what, I got to get into a house. I just got to make it happen. I can't wait any longer. So I'm just really curious to see how pent up demand plays a role. And as economists, it's a little bit challenging to kind of model that. So hopefully we'll see some more modeling on how that's looked at, and how this demand that hasn't been used is pent up and waiting, and will at some point all come to the marketplace.
Yep. So we will see here in the coming months. Let's go ahead and move on to the third and final headline here. This one comes to us from CNBC. The headline reads, "The housing market explained in 6 charts." All right, so this one, as it says, there are 6 different graphs, charts in this particular article, which I know is not great for those of you listening in because you can't necessarily see them, but we will do our best to explain what these charts are saying and kind of how they're painting the picture of what we've just been talking about, basically, with rates and everything like that, and what we've been seeing with the housing market as it's currently sitting. So the first chart that we have pulled up here, the headline of the chart is basically average 30-year fixed rate mortgage in the United States. This one goes from January 2020 through July of 2024. And ultimately, as those of you listening in, I mean, you know what this chart looks like. You can visualize it very well in your brain right now, knowing kind of how it It starts to go up in 2022, and then increases up to the peak, which it shows the peak here was October 26 of 23. And then we've at 7.79%, and it's kind of worked its way down to, as we talked about, well, this one shows 6.89%. Obviously, it's a little lower than that currently, but yeah, we kind of see it go up and start to work its way down, but it's still just kind of sitting there, just waiting for something to happen. Going down to, and Charles, if you have something you want to add on that one before I scroll down.
Yeah, I love charts and graphs, so this is beautiful to me. If you get a chance to go to this article, those of you that are listening, jump in this article. I love charts and graphs, so this is fantastic. It's all the stuff we've been talking about. So I don't know we're seeing new information here, but again, it's just little nuances helping us understand, make better decisions in our businesses by really understanding in a great detail the information. So I assume if you've been listening to the podcast over the last couple of months, you've heard bits and pieces about this, and you're starting to become a subject matter expert. And these are things that you can go, when you're having coffee with your friends, or if you're, in a business meeting, this is giving you good information. So hopefully we're providing some really valuable data points that you can utilize in your business and in your conversations to be smarter and be more productive and make better decisions.
Yeah, for sure. And these graphs are all interactive too. So when you do go and actually look at these, you can hover over them and you get some of the data points and stuff as you're going through them. The next chart we'll look at here is the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index. So this the consumer price index here that we're looking at, or this is the home price index. Sorry, the home price index kind of shows exactly what we've been seeing as well. So going from 2020 up to 2024, it just continues to increase. This one, unlike the interest rate chart, it does not level off and start to work its way back down. It just kind of continues to go up. But we've looked at the chart. We've looked at price index charts before from the Fed website, and generally they just go up. They just kind of work their way up and don't necessarily ever really go back down. It doesn't seem like, just because with inflation and everything like that, price of goods and everything continue to work their way up. But this one here, I'm not sure what the expectation would be as far as to see this level off or stop the growth so quickly is maybe the issue that we have here.
Yeah, the one that still jumps out at me that we talk about all the time is affordability. And this line, it seems hard to even believe, but affordability tumbled more than 33% between 21 and 23 alone. That's crazy. I can't say that I'm a huge fan of CNBC, but damn, they know how to make a graph. Like, these are really good.
Yeah, I'm gonna flip over here really fast, because I did click on the link there and opened in a new tab the Fed website. So I stand corrected.
Yeah.
So the index actually, going back to the 80s, it does have a few points where it goes back down, where it has gone
Oh,
back
dip.
down,
Yeah,
and then
sure.
and then went back up, and it looks like that did happen. Shows here that it happened. They must have sampled some of the data, because it doesn't
Yeah,
look
the
bad
the
on the.
median or the mean there, the trend line wouldn't have deviated much, but
Yeah.
you see some change in data.
Yeah. So I will link to this chart as well, although it links from the actual article. So let me go ahead and flip back to the article here, and we'll go down to the next one.
Did you see this line here of nationally it required 43% of a family's pay to own a home, whereas 30% is that's like the max marker, and we're at well over that.
Yeah. Where is that at in the article? I must have.
That is between the housing affordability index and the
Got it.
share of income index.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, right
Yep.
there. So 43% of pay required to own a home versus 30%. Now, this may go back to the conversation of to own what home? Are they owning
Right.
too big of a home?
Yeah.
Are they stretching that? Could they pull 13% of that cost out? Take 13% of that amount that they were paying to get back down to 30% of their total and live in a little bit smaller house? And I think that's a societal thing that we have to sort through. That could be a very significant factor here.
Yep. Completely agree. Kind of skipping over National Association of Realtors Housing Affordability Index. Really, the main thing on this one, I'm not 100% sure what this index all includes. But this, I mean, it clearly shows they have this red dash line where you can kind of see starting back in 2020. You're kind of dancing around the line a little bit with this index, and then eventually in 2023, it went down below the affordability line and has gone up briefly, but has really kind of stayed down. And it looks like we're on a point where it's coming back up, but I guess we'll kind of see how this chart goes. This is not an index that I've personally tracked over time, so not 100% sure what all goes into it. So the next one down here
Mm-hmm.
is the one you were just talking about, Charles, with the share of income needed to own a medium price U.S. home, which is pretty crazy to look at and consider. And now, like you said, as the median price of homes goes up, um, we basically find ourselves in a spot where we do have to ask some of those questions, right? Because the prices are likely not going to come down. Our incomes historically have never kept pace, with what the with inflation, especially in this at this time period. I mean, it has not kept pace. So, is it a matter of our homes? Like you said, the homes continue to grow in size for the starter homes, or do we get back to that point where people do truly have a starter home and then they can build up equity and get to the point where they can move into that bigger house versus trying to have that bigger house be their first house. And it does seem like maybe we're seeing that from some of the bigger builders out there as they're starting to
Oh yeah.
build some of these
Yep.
developments that have homes that are smaller. They're a smaller footprint home, and you're seeing some of those homes stamped out that you're going to have people. They're going to be more affordable for people versus some of the wider footprint houses and
Yep.
bigger yards and everything.
Yeah, definitely targeting that sub $200,000 home. A lot of the big builders have got a product type that fits that. I was down in San Antonio looking at some of those. There's a bunch of them in that market, and it works. If you need to get into a home at an economical price, sub 200 is, yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yep. And so we've got a couple more here. And the next one is year over year percent change in components of the Atlanta Fed's home ownership affordability monitor index. And really what this one tells me is that, when you look at how the percentage of the pieces that make up the index, the price, rates, and income make it up, it seems like the biggest difference here, initially the biggest change was coming in the prices, but then it's been the rates and how the rates have changed that has changed the most in how this is made up. So again, as we see what's going to happen to rates here over the next, I would say 12 to 24 months, as we see what happens, and eventually, hopefully we get to the new home for where we're going to see rates and where they're going to sit, not down at 1% and 2%, but like what that number is, whether it's a 5%, 5.5%, or somewhere where it can actually sit and make sense for us. Be interesting to see how some of these indexes also change.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one down here is the share of U.S. fixed rate mortgages above and below the national average. And this one, just looking at it, it's pretty telling, like right away, why people aren't leaving their existing homes and going and looking for another home, just based on the number of people who are above the average right now versus how it was previously. So you can kind of see on this graph here just how the percentage of people who are below the national average is significantly higher than it was previously. And oops, if I can stay on there, kind of see how that looks. So I mean, we're, like we've said, it seems to be the best spot for consumers to get into a new home into a home is a new home, because you're not going to see a lot of people leaving their existing mortgages to go from a 2 or 3, 4% up to a 6.5, 7% mortgage or anything like that, depending on how much equity they have in that home and everything. So pretty telling graph here.
Yeah, the flip there is really fascinating from 2020 to now.
Yeah, it really is. All right. Well, that is the last chart on this one. Anything you want to add, Charles, before we wrap it up?
Well, we're continuing to see a lot of the stuff that we've talked about for a number of months. It's we're not seeing new revelations. There's nothing crazy that's changing. The stuff that we're talking about is little shifts here and there, and we're trying to stay abreast of these things and give you the incremental data. And so it's sometimes it sounds like we're saying the same thing, but we're saying it with the up to date information, and it's adjusting slowly and a little bit at a time. So if you're following and you're listening to this every week or every other week, you're seeing this data as it comes to you, and we're staying up to the moment. If you look at the difference, over a year or 2 years of this data as we're bringing it to you, you're going to see massive changes. But we don't want you to have to see it in massive changes. We want to bring it to you in a way that is productive, where you're getting these incremental information. Like as soon as we see a change, as soon as we see new information, we're bringing it in and talking about it. So I hope that everybody's finding benefit there. I know it's helping me in my business and making decisions, just reading these and looking through these articles on a every other week basis.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, so thanks again, everybody, for tuning in, and we will be back next week with an interview episode. I know it's been a few weeks since we've had one, but we'll be back onto our normal schedule next week. And as I always ask, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. Really appreciate you doing that. I know we continue to see our numbers going up, and it's just we're super appreciative of all the support and everything. So that is all we have for today. We will talk to you next time.